It is an honor to introduce our next panel, which will focus on islands and digital connectivity. To moderate that panel, I give to you the floor, Alina Noor, Senior Fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace.
Thank you, Jessica. Good morning to all of you on the second day. If you were here yesterday, I'm sorry you have to put up with me again today. But this should be a really interesting panel, and we're not here to listen to me. We're here to listen to three experts on the issue. Before I introduce them, maybe just to set the scene very, very briefly, there's a lot of optimism and positivity about digital transformation in many parts of the world, including in the Pacific Island region. A lot of that focus is on government transformation through digital means, economic growth, commercial investment, private sector capacity building. We'll talk a little bit about that, but I think we also could probably question the assumption that all digital is necessarily good and inherently good. And we may also, depending on your questions as well, get into some of those risks, particularly related to some of the governance issues. The topics surrounding digital transformation are varied across the Pacific and Indian Oceans, particularly given varied social contexts, political contexts, capacity, both in terms of personnel as well as finances, but also topography and geography. We heard a little bit yesterday about the challenges in connecting different islands, both physically as well as digitally. But there are also very real issues related to natural landscapes, both underwater and above water. And the ambassador here knows much more about that than I do with volcanic activity underwater. So we'll get into some of that. And so now let me introduce the panelists we have today. I'll begin with Ambassador Vainga-Tone, who is the permanent representative of Tonga to the United Nations. Prior to his latest appointment, Ambassador Tone was his country's Secretary of Foreign Affairs from 2013 to 2017, and has acted in various capacities in government, including as Acting Secretary for Foreign Affairs, Acting Minister for Foreign Affairs, Deputy Secretary and Chief of Protocol at the Ministry. The list goes on because Ambassador Tone, of course, has served for a long time in government. We have in the middle Mr. Hirata Tomoyuki, who is the Chief Representative for the Japan Bank for International Cooperation's Washington, D.C. practice. Mr. Hirata has a background in development finance, spanning strategic research, planning, and partnerships. Last but certainly not least, I have the pleasure of announcing Mr. Michael Schiffer, whom I've had the honor of knowing for quite a while, so I'm pleased that he's on the panel with us. Mr. Schiffer is the Assistant Administrator of the Bureau for Asia at USAID. From 2012 to 2022, Mr. Schiffer was a Senior Advisor and Counselor on the Democratic Staff of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Prior to that, he served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for East Asia in the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Asian and Pacific Security Affairs. Before joining the Department of Defense, he was a program officer at the Stanley Foundation, where I first got to know Mr. Schiffer. So it's a real pleasure and honor for me to be moderating this conversation with all three esteemed gentlemen. Perhaps I'll start by inviting Ambassador Tone to present very brief remarks before we move on to Mr. Hirata and then Mr. Schiffer.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Alina, for giving me the floor. Perhaps if I may just deliver my prepared remarks, and I'll be more interactive later on in the Q&A section. Try to limit my presentation. I think I'm given about 5 minutes, but I think my presentation is going to be about 6 minutes. So, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me the floor. It is indeed an honor for me to speak at this important roundtable focusing on islands and digital transformation. As a small island developing state, Tonga recognizes technology as an essential pillar in delivering its development agenda as set out under the Tonga Strategic Development Framework number 2. Pillar 4 of our TSDF, which is the acronym for our national plan, emphasizes at the national level a more innovative use of information and communication technology to link people within and across the kingdom and with the rest of the world for the delivery of key services by government and business and drawing communities more closely together. It recognizes that in order to achieve this, there is a recognition of the importance of three things. One, extending the cable connection from Tonga Tapu, which is the main island of Tonga, to the other main centers supported by improved microwave links. Second, expanding the use of e-government, e-commerce, e-learning, and e-entertainment, finding ways to use them to mitigate the distance between our communities. And thirdly, expanding training and skills in the use of modern ICT, including encouraging foreign investments in this area. In 2019, the government published a digital government strategic framework, 2019 to 2024, to guide government's vision in building a sustainable and efficient digital government to achieve these strategic objectives. Relevant additional frameworks developed by the government include the Tonga Enterprise Architecture Framework, Tonga Interoperability Framework, Tonga Data Exchange Policy and Framework, Tonga E-commerce Strategy, and the National Cybersecurity Framework. In January 2022, His Majesty's Cabinet established, by virtue of a Cabinet directive, a digital transformation department within the Prime Minister's office. The department was established to assist the government in delivering on one of its priorities in transitioning government agencies to automate internal business processes and enable delivery of public services through digital means and implementing a number of important frameworks as set out above. Digital transformation will only be possible within the appropriate equipment and technology and stable internet connections, either by satellite or underwater cables or pipelines. Let me elaborate on 3 points very briefly. Firstly, priorities. Secondly, needs. And thirdly, challenges. Firstly, priorities. Tonga's main priority in pursuing digital transformation, like all developing countries, is development. This includes development in how the government provides services to the public, namely in a more efficient, effective way with low cost. It includes development of the private sector and community at large. ICTs bring a sweep of development opportunities for all Tongan citizens. COVID-19 also increased Tonga's dependence on and use of ICTs. Second, the needs. We need not only the infrastructure to facilitate digital transformation, but the human resource or expertise to set up and maintain this. Of course, ongoing funding of these are key. We are thankful to donor partners for current funding of key projects for our digital transformation journey. There are key frameworks that need to be implemented and laws that need to be enacted to facilitate digital transformation. The current key laws to be enacted are the Cybersecurity Bill, Cybercrime Bill, and Data Privacy and Protection Bill. Current work is being done to draft these. Thirdly, the challenges. However, we try to get ahead with the digital transformation. As a small island developing state, we have and can encounter several threats and challenges. Only one of these challenges can take us 10 steps backward. And these challenges include, and I'll mention a couple, connectivity disruptions as a result of natural disasters, something that Elena mentioned in her introduction. Tonga is one of the most vulnerable countries to natural disasters. This has, in recent years, been intensified with the climate crisis. We witnessed this firsthand through the Hunga Ha'apai eruption and tsunami that followed. The eruption damaged our fiber optic cable, leaving Tonga disconnected from the world for over a month. Almost 2 years later, connection to the other islands is still not fully recovered. The second challenge is digital security in the face of geopolitics, and by that I mean different security initiatives and threats. We simply do not have the sufficient capabilities of more developed countries to respond to a cyber attack. Of increasing concern lately are ransomware attacks. Our government-owned telecommunications company, TCC, suffered a ransomware attack, encrypting and locking access to part of its system in February of this year. Before concluding, there are a couple of questions that I want to address very briefly. Firstly, is Tonga thinking about digital transformation in a radically different way? Well, yes, 3 points here. Implementation of the frameworks. There were several that I mentioned earlier on. Second, the use of ICT for more effective natural disaster warning systems, that I think we receive assistance from the government of Japan in this regard. And thirdly, steps like Tuvalu is taking with turning to the metaverse to preserve Tuvalu in the face of climate change, which is a question that we cannot completely take off the table. And the second question, before closing, Elena, is digital transformation priorities of island nations and how partners are effectively supporting those. Well, there are a number of partners that have been very useful to Tonga. The World Bank, through the Digital Government Support Project, by funding the drafting of the legislation that I talked about earlier on. Japan supporting of the natural disaster warning system, and Australia assisting with our ransomware attack earlier this year. And there are other donors helping along in the journey. I thank you, Elena.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Tony, for that. We'll get into more of a conversation later on, but thank you for providing that overview. Mr. Hirata,
Yes.
can I invite you're free to speak from your seat, or if
Okay.
you'd like to take the podium, that's up
yes,
to you as well.
fine.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. Japan Bank for International Cooperation is a governmental financial institution, principally supporting Japanese companies' overseas activities. But now we are focusing on the, strategic important projects like high quality infrastructure, supply chain resilience, and decarbonization, etc. So, and Indo-Pacific area is our focus, in recent years. And then together with the like-minded countries, counterparties, so we try to support the tangible projects in the Pacific area, including the Pacific region as well. So looking at the digital infrastructure in island nations, first of all, we see some issue to address still. According to the statistics of ITU, so there are still, many countries who have a very low rate of penetration of internet, only 30 to 40%. And also, it mentions that they still have old generation, carriers, so like second generations and third generation. Only a part of countries now deploy a fourth generation, but the remaining one is still second, third. So we need to, so they need to deploy a high quality digital infrastructure. That's the first issue. And more importantly, I think that as Ambassador mentioned, so some countries, sometimes are, very vulnerable because of the only one single track of submarine cable. So in this regard, they need to double the track at least, or they will need to have a multi-track in order to survive the vulnerability. So, well, actually, on a government level, Japanese government has cooperated with the island nation for further collaboration. And very recently, this May, so-called Quad, U.S., Australia, India, and Japan, has committed to support, the Pacific Island nations, for example, including climate actions, maritime soundness, and also resilient infrastructure. That includes the cable network. So, and as for Palau, they committed to cooperate with them to deploy Open RAN network in the future. Under this framework, I understand USTDA has announced the, providing a feasibility study to, for the future Open RAN network deployment. But anyway, so JBIC has done a couple of transactions together with the, US and Australia in the Pacific Island nations. Firstly, in 2021, we have supported, Palau's deployment of a submarine cable network, which is linking with the main line between California and Singapore, and utilizing Japanese companies' NEC's technology. So in that case, we have provided export loan, but not only that, we also cooperate with the US and Australian counterparts. They provided a grant. So a combination of a grant and loans that enhancing the bankability on our side, and that also mitigated the burden on the borrower side. So that kind of support was there in that case. And also we have supported Australian Telestorm to buying the stake of the PNG, Digital Pacific. So in that case, Australian EFA provided a loan to that project, but we provided a guarantee together with the USA counterparts. So in this case, we have achieved a risk sharing among 3 countries on the lender side. And then this Pacific can modernize the equipment and network of the South Pacific network because they have already share of the 60% of South Pacific network. So yeah, we can consider supporting in the island nation together with like-minded countries, counterparties. So I will stop for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hirata. Mr. Schiffer, over to you.
Thank you, and thank you all for inviting me to join this conversation this morning. And my special thanks to Alina for chairing this panel. As she said, we've had the pleasure of knowing each other for a number of years now, and I can guarantee you I've never found myself in a setting where I would rather be listening to me than to you, but today may be different, who knows. Let me also offer you my apologies in advance. I need to leave at around 1:45 to get to another event, this being the nature of UNGA Week and events around here. But for today's conversation, let me offer a few thoughts about how we at the U.S. Agency for International Development and the U.S. government more broadly are thinking about this set of issues. And I will start by saying, in this room and in this audience, that we start with a recognition in Washington that we enter into this conversation coming off of a number of years which can be charitably described as having been characterized by inattention and underinvestment in the Pacific, and allowing many of our important friendships and relationships in the region to attenuate, and a deep commitment coming off of that to do better as a partner and as a friend in the region. So we are absolutely committed to the 2050 strategy for a Blue Pacific, and to stepping up our presence in the region. As Administrator Power offered on her trip to Papua New Guinea and Fiji last month, we opened a country representative office in PNG and our new Pacific mission in Fiji. Our approach is animated by a spirit of listening, partnering, and delivering on our shared development goals. And as we've listened to our partners in the region, as the ambassador offered here this morning, one thing that we have heard over and over and over again is the need for reliable and affordable digital connectivity, both in the region, across the region, and connecting the Blue Pacific continent to the global community. Reliable broadband, as I know everybody in this room appreciates, has become a prerequisite for learning, for livelihoods, for social connections, and as a driver for economic growth and partnership in the global community. The digital transformation that we've all experienced over the past several decades is as profound a technological, a social, and an economic revolution as any we've experienced in human history. Yet, for too many in the Pacific, there's a real risk of being left out, of being unable to access safe, secure, and reliable digital architecture, and with it, sustainable economic growth and development. That's primarily due to the challenge created by economies of scale for small island developing states, again, as the ambassador commented on, which present real challenges for investments in digital architecture in the Pacific. And that's where we hope the development toolkit that USAID and other partners like JBIC can come into play, addressing technical needs, addressing market misalignments and market failures, and bridging the gaps. So let me offer a couple of examples of the sorts of things that we're doing to try to address the needs and to be a good partner for our friends in the region. On the policy level, USAID is working with governments in the region to support regulations, support resilient architecture that is capable of addressing mismal and disinformation, building media skills and literacy, and addressing online abuse, especially that which targets women and girls. That part of the architecture, sort of the soft side of infrastructure, is just as critical as the hard infrastructure that we're also seeking to support. And on that side, USAID is looking to support the technical needs in the region by providing technical expertise through initiatives like the recently launched Digital Connectivity and Cybersecurity Partnership, DCCP Pacific, which is a 5-year program that seeks to improve access to broadband internet, strengthening digital policy and regulations, advancing digital platforms for the delivery of public services, and upgrading digital skills and literacy. We're also working with Kiribati, the Marshall Islands, Micronesia, Nauru, and Palau to foster more reliable digital systems for disaster warning and management and response. Working with other development partners like Australia and Japan and for the construction of the Palau and East Micronesia cables to provide reliable high-speed internet and the hard architecture and infrastructure that is so needed in the region. And working to connect small and medium enterprises across the Pacific to digital trade opportunities. Just a short time ago, we had an event with our Global Development Alliance with 12 leading private sector partners, including Google, DHS, MasterCard, Visa, PayPal. I know I'm leaving some out. I apologize to those that I'm leaving out. To draw together the private sector in the global north with partners in the private sector in the Pacific, and just as importantly with local communities and governments and regional institutions like the SPC and the PIF to see if we could catalyze the sort of connectivity and economic growth that will be necessary to drive the creation of an open, secure digital architecture for the region. We don't have any illusions about the scale of the challenges that we face and that our partners face. But through these sorts of programs, USAID is committed to doing our part to work alongside our partners to support them and their vision for safe and reliable digital connectivity for the Blue Pacific continent. Thank you.
Wonderful. But let me turn to the room and see if anybody has any specific questions right now for Mr. Schiffer. If you're still thinking of them, let me maybe ask you, Mike. So you mentioned at the outset of your remarks that you've been listening a lot in the region. And some of the initiatives that you've laid out seem to be very comprehensive. Are these initiatives a result of your listening to partners' needs? Are there other priorities that you're still working on, the agency is working on, that you might be able to share with us?
I mean, the programs that we are trying to roll out have been a result of our listening, which, as many of you know, is not necessarily something that comes easily or naturally to the U.S. government, but we are trying. And you know, I would also say that you know, for many of these initiatives, like the DCCP for the Pacific, which we're doing in partnership with the University of the South Pacific and others, it's a 5-year program that we're at the front end of. Right, this is not a question of, you know, we're gonna listen once in 2023 and then it's set in stone and it's on autopilot. Right, this is, we hope, a constant and ongoing conversation. And that's part of the reason why we you know, reopened or opened, depending upon how you look at the history, our Pacific mission in Fiji for the region and our country representative office in Port Moresby in PNG, because we've not been present and having the conversations in the sort of way and with the sort of quality that we need. All of which is to say that I'm going to both sort of dodge and not dodge the second half of your question by saying that, you know, this is not about us sharing with you all of our great ideas and the, you know, neat shiny objects that we find on the table. This is about us having a conversation and us wanting to hear the thoughts, the ideas, the priorities that our friends and our partners in the region have, and wanting to connect up with local communities who, after all, know their own problems and challenges best and have the best ideas on how to address them. Right? This isn't something that we can solve or should be solving from 7,000 miles away. This is something we solve together, you know, on the ground, where people live and where the needs are. So I don't want to answer the second part because I want to hear from you all, you know, what your thoughts, your ideas, and your suggestions are for the sorts of things we ought to be thinking about.
Great. So not only questions, but if you have suggestions and feedback for Mr. Schiffer and USAID's initiatives, please raise your hand. Ambassador Tone, can I turn to you? It seems as if Tonga is at the forefront in the Pacific region of some of these digital projects. You mentioned the metaverse. I wonder if you could speak a little bit more about that, how Tonga is thinking of the metaverse and thinking about making the most of it. But also, if I read correctly, there was some interest in making cryptocurrency legal in Tonga. Some really interesting approaches here. Could you elaborate on those?
Thank you, Elena. I don't think if I can answer comprehensively, but let me just share perhaps regarding the metaverse. I think it's a term that is, I think, used by Tuvalu. I think Tuvalu is, I think officially has stepped up and tried to engage with that idea of metaverse. I think the situation with Tuvalu, of course, with the sea level rise is very more serious. I think in Tonga, of course, the coastal areas, but we do have some high grounds in Tonga. But still, nevertheless, I think the point I did was still very relevant in terms of going forward. You know, for Tuvalu, this is Tuvalu. It's very obvious. I think Kiribati is also in the front line of climate change. But I think the argument is still relevant for coastline areas. You know, to think about that, maybe not a total submerged, but some areas of the countries that they can risk being submerged or overtaken by sea level rise. And the idea, it's a work in progress. You know, it is going in tandem with technology. I mean, technology it's also a work in progress. But as we try to develop our countries and try to solve solutions, whether it's related to climate change, you know, we look at the technology because data, technology, science, STI, science, technology and innovation, these are relevant areas to look at by government in terms of solving the issue. So again, to go back to the questions, Elena, metaverse, I think more I think it's been officially raised by Tuvalu as a way of thinking about the future of their country. For Tonga, not quite so, but we're looking at that because the question is, how can you think radically about digital transformation, and metaverse could be, it's on the table, it's not off the table. The other point was about
Crypto.
Crypto. It's not officially, let's say, tabled for approval, but I know in Fiji, I think it's been discussed over there, and maybe, of course, other countries. But we can say that is something to look at from the perspective of Tonga, because it's something the domain of technology and innovation. It's just a matter of how a country will loop that into part of the solution of its own. I think it's a work in progress in Tonga, but we've heard other countries, including Fiji, taking that idea on board. Thank you.
Thank you for correcting me and for the clarification. I do have a follow-up question about what that means for the computing power and sustainability efforts in the Pacific Island. But I know there are some hands that have gone up. Let me start. I recognize 3 hands for the moment. Let me start with Rudra. Can you just introduce yourself briefly as well?
Hi, I'm Rudra from Carnegie, India. Just 3 very quick points since Michael opened the door on suggestions. One is in the area of general digital transformation, especially work on public infrastructure, technology artifacts. What we generally see is a lack of conversation like this. This is a great setup. You've got the demand side, you've got the supply side, and then you've got you in the middle, which is the most important side in many ways, because you do a lot of the financing in many different ways. But that doesn't happen globally, right? So Michael, if you want a suggestion, one is, how does USAID play? You've got the legitimacy, you've got the leadership. So how do you play the role in kind of matching the demand and supply side? Second is at some level on this question of, we call it digital public infrastructure. Big parts of the world call it that now. But how do you distinguish between good DPI and bad DPI? I think the G20 process has got some framework. The UNSG just started this new high impact initiative on DPI. They've got some universal declaration on safeguards, etc. But how do we all agree on kind of basic standards on DPI, right? And I think that's worth kind of really looking into now. And that's going to matter to Tonga, which is in conversation with, I know, various supply sides now in terms of how do you build DPI, how do you do ID, how do you do payments, data exchanges, etc. And the third point, which is one conversation we don't have, is how do you deploy this stuff, right? And that's where the private sector really matters. Because at the end of the day, it's not governments or JBEC that's going to deploy this to 100 countries or 150 countries. It's the private sector. So how do you get that compact right where you do fully packaged, fully licensed, governed, institutionally kind of packaged, locally contextualized digital infrastructures in different parts of the world? So that may be 3 points to just think about across the board from all segments.
Fantastic, thank you. If you don't mind, can you hold your responses? I'll just collect the 2 interventions. Gentleman in the front, please.
Good morning, thank you. Michael Kovrig with the International Crisis Group. I'd like to ask the representative from Tonga, who are your main development partners currently in the digital transformation space? What are your top what are you currently getting from each of them, and what would you like more of from each of them? Or how would you ideally like them to engage with you more or differently to support your objectives?
And there was a hand in the back, please.
My question is to Mr. Schiffer. I have the one question on the digital connectivity to the Pacific Islands and basically in Indo-Pacific, and another on geopolitics, because I kind of work on the geopolitics. So for the digital connectivity, you mentioned that you are listening to the partners and working on providing the reliable and efficient digital connectivity. So just my question is what will be the regulations there? We heard Ambassador Tito here that he was saying that mentioning they are deep rooted in their culture. So is there kind of issue of data privacy or how to make that transparent? The one question, and the another is on the geopolitics. Yesterday we heard from the Pacific Island leaders, and they were mentioning that US is a bit running late in the policies in the islands, and the last month, in the month of August, that we know that forming the embassy in the PNG and the special mission in Fiji, So how do you see that, is there really late there to reaching out at this moment, or it's making the competition more dense with China because China is already there, establishing the bases, economic zones.
Thank you. Can you just state your name and affiliation, please?
Yeah, my name is Indo-Pacific. I work for the Consortium of Indo-Pacific Researchers.
Thank you. Mike, next.
Sure. I guess I have the first and the third question. To Roger's point about convening conversations like this, I absolutely agree. One of the powers that we have, in government, although this is obviously, a terrific setting that Carnegie has pulled together, is precisely to be able to convene conversations and to seek to be a catalyst for action where we can bring together all of the different stakeholders in configurations where gaps or missing pieces or complementary strengths and capabilities that might not otherwise be visible are able to emerge. Administrator Power talks about this constantly in the context of what she calls progress beyond programs, which is that the way in which we need to be thinking about our work is not identifying the particular little bureaucratic silo of a programmatic element that we or another part of the U.S. government pursues, but identifying problems and then figuring out how we work together to solve those problems, bringing to bear whomever has the capacity, whoever has the solution set to address the problem. Because if our bureaucracy doesn't match up against the problem, we still have the problem to deal with. And when we're talking about issues like digital infrastructure or the existential challenge of climate change in the Pacific, those are big and enduring problems and big and enduring challenges. And I think that also speaks to the question that you raised about how do we create the right sort of conversation for the standards that we need to be able to collectively. It's not a question of our standards, it's a question of the collective set of standards that we want to enunciate for governing the digital space and for creating the right set of incentives and de-risking so that the private sector comes in on this deployment question in the sort of way that'll be necessary. Governments simply don't have the resources at scale that are going to be needed to solve these problems if we don't have private sector buy-in, particularly when it comes to deployment. Like that, to the third question, I think that also speaks to this question of how we address both the hardware side of the problem, but then the software side, where we do face a dizzying array of different regulatory and governance frameworks in the Pacific that we need to all collectively work together to figure out how to resolve differences. And look, this is not a question that is unique to the Pacific. You mentioned data privacy. That's been a major friction point between the United States and the European Union for the past number of years, right? This is a global challenge that we all, as members of the global community, need to engage in together to figure out what the right sort of governance structures are that allows us to have the open, reliable, safe, secure digital architecture that I think we all desire and that can really drive economic prosperity in a sustainable way. For the last point about whether or not we're late to the game or more boldly put, driven only by geostrategic considerations, I guess I would offer that the United States has been engaged in part of the Pacific since our very founding as a republic in the 18th century. As I reminded my friends in Suva when I was in Fiji last month, Our first ambassador to Fiji goes back to the 1840s, 1849, I think. I may be getting it off by a year. So we've been in and part of the Pacific for the past several hundred years, independent of all of the other geopolitical dynamics of the 19th or 20th or now the still early 21st century. And we're part of the Pacific community because we're part of the Pacific community. We're a Pacific nation ourselves. I think the challenge, as I said at the outset, has been that our attention has been episodic. And we need to make sure that we are better about being enduring and making sure that our presence is enduring and that our engagement is enduring, because our interests are enduring and the values that animate us, that also animate many of our friends in the region, are likewise enduring. So I think that's the question for us, is how to demonstrate that we are walking the walk, swimming the swim, surfing the surf, as a good member of the Pacific community.
Thank you, Mike. I know you have to run, and if you need to walk the walk, we'll let you go. Hirata-san.
Yes, I just can take one question from you regarding the private investment. Actually, mobilizing private investment is always an issue for example, deploying infrastructure, actually not only in an island nation, but also all over the world, especially in the developing countries. But JBIC has joined as a so-called, Blue Dot network. This is for certification mechanism, utilized for the, level of infrastructure. So if we can show that infrastructure is high quality, then we can mobilize, private investment from all over the world. So now we are designing, 10-point criteria, including, of course, environmental and social considerations, and protection against corruption, and the inclusiveness of a local community, etc. So yeah, that's one of our activities here. So I'd like to introduce to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador Tony.
Thank you, Elena. I think Elena started with the second question. If I may just start by highlighting the importance of, the dictum from the Samoa Pathway about the genuine and durable partnership. And I think I can use that to answer the questions. And of course, I did allude to the fact that Australia, Japan, and one other country have been helping Tonga with the frameworks, with our legislation. I think it's very important that we start with a proper legislation to make sure that we are covered at the political level, at the government level. That is ongoing. And of course, the malware that I mentioned, I think Australia came and assisted in that regard, simply because we don't have the technology to deal with that. And also, of course, Japan with the assistance in terms of the early warning system. We may have the infrastructure, the microwave, things like that, but there is a natural disaster that will take them off. It'll be a devastating effect in the development of Tonga. So I want to connect, so those are some of the partners. And of course, it's a work in progress. There are other partners. I want to connect it to the first question about investment. I think Tomo has replied to that, and Mr. Schaefer. Again, it goes back to partnership. Not all developing countries can address all the issues of the transformation technology. So we look for partners. They have the technology, they have the know-how, but we have the problems. We have the issues. And of course, when you talk about global issues, if we are a weak link, just like in drug trafficking, we will be a problem to the other parts of the chain. So it is important that we engage in constructive partnership, whether it's Japan or US or the global north, so that they can help us in terms of developing our
our journey with digital transformation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Tony. I know there was a hand over to my left. Gentlemen, please, sir.
Good afternoon, Kevin Jesus, Johnson & Wales University. My question was originally focused for Mr. Schiffer.
I'm sorry.
No, I understand. It's okay. But I'm very interested to have you all reflect, if you would, on what priority is being sort of forged for collaborative research initiatives as a result of expanded digital infrastructure and capacity, with universities in the United States, Japan, other areas, and universities in your region.
Thank you. If there are any other questions at this point, please.
I'm Daisuke Komatsu, working for Japan International Transport and Tourism Institute. I have a question to Mr. Hirata-san. I'd like to know the JBIC's policy or views on digital transport transformation support to the nations in Pacific Island. So I'd like to know the reason why the JBIC picked up Palau as one of the recipient country of digital transportation support. My second question is, do you have any specific policy or vision to broaden your support to other countries in the region? Thank you.
Thank you. Let me round off this round, which will likely be the final round, unless anybody has any burning questions, with my own questions for each, Ambassador Tony and Hirata-san. Ambassador Tony, this panel is about a digital transformation, but it can also mean a societal transformation with the digital element. Mr. Schiffer briefly alluded to digital literacy programs that USAID is conducting. Just anecdotally, I've heard from colleagues in the Pacific Islands that sometimes there's a struggle in communities about dealing with a digital onslaught, as it were, because all of a sudden you're exposed to all sorts of the negative effects of digital connectivity. We're talking about too much time spent on the internet, porn, and obviously you mentioned ransomware. People are more vulnerable to cybercrime. I wonder if you could comment a little bit about the societal transformation that's accompanying this digital transformation in Tonga and perhaps elsewhere as well in the region. Hirata-san, you mentioned the Quad. Can I possibly get your frank assessment over how much geopolitics plays into the initiatives of JBIC in the region? Ambassador Tony, would you like to kick us off?
Thank you, Elena, for the question. I think the key issue here for Tonga is education in trying to address the onslaught of the digital transformation and all the impacts, whether it's negative or positive. I think it's the same. It will be the same case for many, if not all of the other countries, but definitely the SIDS, because we know, of course, with the digital transformation, there are advantages. It helps you to connect, make services, whether it's business or government, more efficient. But then again, of course, when you talk about the cybersecurity, pornography, things like that, things that will harm students and youth, I think it's very important that you legislate, and I think I talked about a number of legislation in the case of Tonga, but also, of course, education. I think for the key thing for Tonga is when we talk about digital transformation and digital divide, we make sure that we don't improve one island at the expense of the other islands. I think when you talk about digital transformation, you should be talking about the whole. When you talk about health, for example, you should talk about the health nationwide. So because Tonga is an archipelagic country, there are about 170 islands. Not all of them are inhabited, but there are some main centers. The government needs to connect them well, to improve education and so forth. Again, to answer your question, I think education is very important. And of course, the good side is quite obvious. Improvement in efficiency, providing of services, connectivity amongst people, community. But with the adverse impacts of that, I think this is where education and we have established an office, I think office in the Prime Minister's office that I mentioned before. They drafted a manual, and they notify people of cyber safety, things, behavior to do by the people so that they can protect themselves and their bank accounts and so forth. Again, just to conclude, in education, socializing the good behavior in this advent of technology, computer technology. Thank you.
Did you have any reflections in response to the gentleman's question over there?
About the investment, right?
Investment in supporting research.
Oh, yes, scientific. As you well know, in the Pacific and many developing countries, researchers are not so advanced because they tie up to institutions, whether it's academic institutions. Of course, we do have academic institutions, but this is where you link the resources. This is where the global north benefit a lot, and this is where you need to connect to the global north. This is a very good area where we can utilize triangular cooperation with the north-south and so forth. It has to be, because we simply don't have the resource. I mean, we're fighting climate change, we're talking about digital transformation. It's a technology-oriented thing, and we don't have all the resources. But we look for the global north to invest in us, because it does link to geopolitics in the security sense point of view. If there is a weak link there, we need to foster good relations. We need to engage in cyber security, cyber safety, cyber crime. These are all meetings that we do at the UN. We need to make sure that we have agreement, international standards, so we can promote peace. When we conduct our business in the internet in a way that is that conforms to agreements, it helps to preserve peace. I think this is where the linkage between technology and the security in the physical sense, which is something that we fear in the Pacific, because we're in the business of development, implementation of the Agenda 2030. Traditional conflicts that is not prevalent in the Pacific, but if what's happening in Ukraine does encroach into the Pacific, it will disrupt the development, socio-economic development in the Pacific. So again, research, back to the core of the question, this is where we hope that we can connect. Of course, there are regional institutions in the Pacific like SPC and so forth, but I would still count on collaborating, cooperating with the global north in terms of that, so that we can leapfrog, and we don't have to repeat the steps of development. Thank you.
Are you hearing that as part of the agenda from the global north?
Not to the extent that I would like to, but I guess it's there is a drawback there. For us, there are other issues like this is where we need the finance, the investments. But again, we need the population to also go in stride with the scientific community. But again, there will be a good lead by science if there is active engagement, government level, scientific institutions and research to lead and to pave the path.
Thank you, Ambassador. Hirata-san, you have the final substantive word.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Komatsu-san. First of all, we have prioritized supporting digital transformation under our midterm strategy for 3 years, so current one. We do not stick to some specific country. So we have a daily dialogue with the Japanese Business Society. So in that case, Parao's case, so NEC will provide a submarine cable technology to them. Therefore, so we have that with them, and then decided to commit the finance. Yes, we are also interested in, for example, Indian Ocean, not only Pacific Island nations, but also Indian Ocean countries. And in that area, especially we have a good relationship with Indian counterparties like Indian Exim Bank or State Bank of India. We have collaborated, for a lot of projects in India. So therefore, probably we can consider something in collaboration with those counterparties to expand our finance to that region. India may be a key for us to further consideration in widening the area. And yes, so as I mentioned about the Quad, but we also have a MOU with the, for example, USDFC since around 5 or 7 years ago. At the same time, we also have a trilateral MOU, including Australian counterparties, DFAT, Ministry of Trade, and also EFA, Governmental Financial Institution. What I'd like to say is that identifying the project itself is sometimes difficult. Therefore, we try to have a frequent dialogue with our counterparties, what kind of a portfolio we have, and how we can support each other. So that kind of thing we are now trying to do. And yes, so actually, I also mentioned about Blue Dot Network. So anyway, we would like to promote the high quality infrastructure, which is good for host countries. So in this regard, we do not mention about the other countries, but we'd like to seek the possibility of the collaboration for deploying high quality infrastructure, officially speaking. So Blue Dot Network, not only Japan, but also US and Australia have joined. And now we are approaching other countries, and UK and Spain has already agreed to join. So such kind of thing we're doing.
Thank you for that diplomatic answer. I know that, Mr. Kovic, you had a two-finger, but we're at time. Can I suggest that you take it up with them over coffee break? Unfortunately, I know there's a lot more to be discussed, but I hope you'll agree with me that we've had a very rich discussion. Please join me in thanking Ambassador Tony and Hirata-san. I'll invite you to coffee and refreshments in the foyer. Thank you.